Welcome to Renewal, our weekly webcast where we're calling people to seek the face of God, praying that God would revive your heart, stir within you a deep work of His Spirit, bringing you and conforming you more and more into the image of Jesus Christ. And so we appreciate you joining in with us today. God has blessed us in so many ways, and one of the blessings we've had is, as you know, we've been here at the Cove, and we've been meeting Heart Cry for Revival. And we've had a number of speakers from around the nation that God has brought to this conference who have a heart cry, who have a passion to see revival in the land. One of those men that God has used and is using is Henry Blackaby. Henry, thank you so much for taking the time, to be here with us and to just share your heart on revival. I know a little bit of your background, but everybody might not. I know that you were in Canada when God moved and stirred for revival. Was that your first time to see revival, or when did your passion, when did your this heart cry for revival actually begin in your own journey?
Well, that heart cry from the heart of God began as a young boy when I had an encounter with God, where He convinced me that He was God and I wasn't. Mm-hmm. And I have never approached God any other way than that. I've never argued with God. I've never fussed with God. He's God, and I'm not. And when you begin an intimate relationship with God, He lays His heart over your heart. And there's no question in my mind, if you enter the Scriptures seriously and let the Spirit of God be your teacher, you suddenly become aware that God's people have a tendency to depart from God. Mm-hmm. But they're the only ones God has in His purpose to redeem a world. He made a covenant with them, and they're a covenant people. And He said, if you'll walk in my ways and do what I tell you, then I'll bless you, and in and through you all the nations of the earth will be blessed. But the tragedy is, all through history, God's people have departed. Yeah. And I became aware of that. And my heart then, before God, was, how does God then choose to bring His people back? Because I keep hearing God say to Israel, why will you die, O house of Israel? I have no pleasure in the death of him that dies. Return and live. Mm-hmm. And all the people of God that I was a part of, their hearts were not focused on God, but on religious activity. And then I realized that 5 of my relatives graduated from Spurgeon's College on my dad's side, and were a part of the great revival movement under Charles Spurgeon. And then I became aware that the uncle who baptized me, he and his wife were missionaries in northern China and worked with Jonathan Goforth in the great Shantung revival. And then I began to sense God put this history in my life on purpose. And then ultimately, God dropped me into the major cities. And you can't be in a major city without having the heart of God for His people, because the cities are a mess, but God's people are not making a difference. But God intended that they make a difference. But God's people are not paying attention. So that became my heart cry and my ministry.
Let me back up just one thing, because I'm kind of going through, I'm going to ask you something personal here for my sake here, because I'm going through a little bit of what you just spoke of, and I've been in the last year in a place of discovery about my own family life. I thought I grew up in a non-Christian family. I got kicked out of my home when I became a Christian, and because of my commitment to the Lord, and just trying to follow Him. And so I thought my grandparents had died before I was born, and I thought that I'm just from non-Christian, no Christian heritage, and through some strange circumstances, I discovered this incredible heritage. In fact, Louisiana Baptists were started to a great extent through my great-great-great-grandparents who were members of the first Baptist church west of the Mississippi River. They were pioneers, cross-cultural ministry, everything I do today. And what has been amazing to me is to discover things that are so, you can't call them coincidence. My grandmother had a place under the trees where she went and sought the face of God. For the past 20 years, there's a place I go, underneath the trees. I had no idea of anything about my grandmother. You know, how much of a role, and I don't even know what I'm asking here, but how much of a role are we living today on the blessings from the past? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I've been involved in that with the biblical study. For instance, Ananias or Zechariah and Elizabeth, it mentions that they have a very godly heritage that went back centuries. And I began to look at that and realized that when God knows down the road He's going to choose someone, He gives them a godly heritage. And that godly heritage is dramatically impacting what they think and how they function. Sometimes God lets them know if they're sensitive, they will look carefully at their heritage to see. And everything in revival, in my heritage, is what has become a part of my very life. But that's biblical. God does set in motion the preliminary, sometimes centuries, but they come to a head at a critical moment. And all this is very significant in the mind and heart of God. And so that has intensified and focused my life to say, don't waste the centuries of what God has invested preparing you for such an hour as this. Your heart cry for revival is not just you. It is the product of something God has put within you. And so I'm sensing that. And so when I went to Saskatoon, it did not surprise me. My heart was fully prepared. Matter of fact, I went there.
Saskatoon is where the revival
took place in Canada, Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. But the year before, Duncan Campbell, the great revivalist of Scotland, had been there. And Bill McLeod had talked to me about that and said that Duncan Campbell had indicated he's not given to revival. But he said last night God gave him a vision of revival fires breaking out all across Canada from coast to coast. And then he told Bill, he said, when it will be, I do not know, but that it will be, I have no question.